Today, we're going to talk about something that sounds almost mystical at first, but when you break it down, it's grounded in very real, very accessible principles of how your brain, your biology, and your behavior interact. I'm referring to quantum manifestation, not in the pseudo-scientific, wish upon a star way, but in the way that integrates quantum-level awareness with neuroscience and daily actionable habits. Now, before we dive into the idea that your thoughts create your reality, we need to get very clear this isn't magic and it's not about sitting still and just visualizing a better life. This is about understanding how attention, intention, and emotion, when precisely aligned, can activate specific neural circuits, alter your neurochemistry, and fundamentally shift the way you interact with the world. Most people don't practice this not because it's hard, but because it's deceptively simple. The mechanisms are clear, the science is supportive, but the real challenge is consistency, and the reason people fail isn't due to lack of belief, but lack of structure and understanding. And that's what we're going to fix today. Quantum manifestation is often misunderstood because it sounds mystical or abstract, but at its core, it is grounded in a very real and observable set of principles that govern how our brains and bodies interact with the world around us. When we strip away the spiritual jargon and look at the mechanism behind it, what we find is that quantum manifestation operates through the science of attention, intention, and emotional regulation. These are not abstract concepts, they are tangible, measurable processes happening in the nervous system every single day. The human brain is a prediction machine, constantly filtering information from the environment based on what it deems important. That filter is largely determined by where we place our attention. What we focus on becomes what our brain looks for in the external world. This is the foundation of selective attention, and it's why when you start thinking about a specific car, you suddenly see that car everywhere. The world didn't change, you did. Your brain started highlighting what matched your internal focus. Intention plays a key role in this process because it activates the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for decision making and planning. When we set an intention, we're giving our brain a target. That target isn't just an abstract idea. It becomes a reference point that influences what data the brain stores, what actions it prioritizes, and what it begins to suppress. Setting an intention then is like programming the GPS of your mind. Without it, you drift. With it, your attention becomes a guided force rather than a scattered one. It's the difference between letting life happen to you and shaping how you interact with the events and people around you. Once intention is set, the body begins to respond in subtle but measurable ways. Your posture changes, your voice modulates, your eyes scan differently, even your breath pattern shifts depending on whether you're passively observing life or actively pursuing a goal. But attention and intention alone are not enough. The emotional charge behind them is what gives them fuel. Neuroscience has shown that the brain encodes emotionally significant events more deeply than neutral ones. This is why you can recall where you were during emotionally impactful moments years after they happen. Emotion acts as a tagging mechanism in the brain, a highlighter that tells your nervous system, this matters, remember it. When you pair intention with strong emotion, especially positive anticipation, gratitude, or inspiration, you create a powerful cocktail of neurochemicals like dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. These chemicals enhance learning, motivation, and memory consolidation. This is why visualizing a goal while feeling emotionally connected to it has a much higher impact in brain wiring than just thinking about it intellectually. You begin to create new associations, new beliefs, and even new behavioral patterns without necessarily trying to force them. This triad attention, intention, and emotional regulation is the underlying engine of what many people refer to as quantum manifestation. It's not magic, and it's not about controlling reality in some mystical sense. It's about aligning your internal state with a desired external outcome in such a way that your perception, behavior, and opportunities begin to shift. People often say things like you attract what you are, and while that can sound vague in the brain, it's a literal truth. If you're emotionally dysregulated, your attention becomes scattered. If you're scattered, your intentions don't take root. If your intentions are weak, you drift into patterns rather than progress. But if you regulate your emotions, lock in your intention, and repeatedly focus your attention, you begin to generate feedback loops that reinforce that state. Over time, this becomes your baseline, your default operating system. You begin to notice different things. You make different decisions. You're drawn to different environments. This is not quantum in the subatomic sense, but it mirrors those principles in that small shifts in attention and intention can lead to disproportionately large shifts in outcomes. The most important aspect here is that all of this is within conscious control. You don't need to wait for external permission or ideal circumstances. You have agency through your biology. Every time you wake up, your brain is scanning for cues. What should I care about today? What should I prepare for? What should I move toward or move away from? These cues come from your previous experiences, but more importantly, they come from what you choose to focus on in the present. That focus becomes the blueprint that your brain uses to decide what's real and what's noise. The brain doesn't necessarily care what's true, it cares what's repeated. Repetition and emotional intensity are the tools that shape the subconscious mind. When used deliberately, they become tools of quantum manifestation. It starts with a decision to focus. It continues with a decision to define. And it builds through the emotional energy you bring to that definition every single day. Your brain is not a passive observer of reality, it's an active participant in constructing it. Every second, your nervous system processes millions of bits of information, but only a small fraction of that ever reaches your conscious awareness. What determines which signals break through the noise? The answer lies in what you consistently focus on. Neural circuits are shaped by repetition, attention, and emotional significance. This means that what you think about regularly, what you emotionally engage with, and what you pay attention to begins to solidify in your brain's architecture, quite literally becoming the lens through which you interpret the world around you. The term for this process is neuroplasticity, which refers to the brain's ability to rewire itself based on experience. This isn't a metaphor, it's a biological reality, and is the foundational mechanism behind why quantum manifestation is not only possible but inevitable for those who engage with it consistently. When you focus your attention on a specific thought or outcome, especially one that's emotionally charged, you begin to activate particular neural pathways in the brain. These pathways don't just light up momentarily with enough repetition, they become stronger and more dominant. Like a trail in the forest walked over again and again, these neural routes become the preferred paths for your thoughts, decisions, and even your actions. This is how beliefs are formed. Beliefs are not static truths, they are repeated patterns of neural activity reinforced over time. If you think you're unlucky, and you keep reinforcing that belief by focusing on events that confirm it, your brain filters out evidence to the contrary. You literally stop seeing opportunities that don't align with your internal story. This phenomenon is not just psychological, it is neurobiological. The reticular activating system, RAS, a network of neurons in the brainstem, acts like a gatekeeper for information. It's programmed by what you consistently focus on. Tell it what to look for by thinking about it often enough, and your brain will begin to scan your environment to find evidence that supports that internal narrative. This is how your external reality starts to match your internal wiring. If you repeatedly focus on abundance, gratitude, and growth, the RAS and other associated brain systems begin to attune themselves to situations, people, and decisions that resonate with those states. This doesn't mean that magical opportunities just fall into your lap. It means your brain is now tuned to perceive and act upon possibilities that were always there but previously invisible to you because your neural circuits were aligned with scarcity, fear, or distraction. Repetition is key. The brain doesn't change from one powerful thought. It changes through repeated experiences and attention. And what you repeat becomes what you believe, and what you believe drives your behavior, which in turn shapes your reality. The science behind this is deeply supported by research in areas like Hebbian learning, which says that neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you revisit a thought or visualization, especially when paired with emotional intensity, you are wiring a particular belief deeper into your brain. Think of it like carving grooves into a record. The more times the needle runs through the same groove, the easier it is for it to stay in that track. This is why people get stuck in cycles of negativity or self-doubt. They've simply trained their brains to default to those grooves. But the beauty of neuroplasticity is that you can choose to redirect the needle, to carve new grooves intentionally. And once those new circuits begin to dominate, your experience of life starts to shift. You begin to interpret challenges differently. You respond to setbacks with more resilience. You notice connections, synchronicities, and chances that align with your focus. The body is not separate from this process. The brain communicates with every part of the body through electrical and chemical signals, and your focus determines which system are activated. When you consistently focus on stress or fear, the hypothalamus triggers the stress response system, flooding your body with cortisol and adrenaline. This state of chronic stress suppresses creativity, limits problem-solving abilities, and narrows your field of perception. On the other hand, focusing on calm, empowered thoughts, especially when combined with breath regulation or mindfulness, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, promoting relaxation, openness, and receptivity. This physiological state is optimal for learning, growth, and connection. Over time, a brain trained to focus on positive, constructive outcomes will begin to operate from this relaxed yet alert state more frequently. The cycle feeds itself. The more you focus on what you want, the more your brain creates the pathways to support it, and the more your behavior begins to reflect those internal changes. This is the process through which your inner world shapes your outer world, not through force or fantasy, but through consistent neurological alignment with your desired outcomes. The power of quantum manifestation lies in its simplicity, yet this simplicity is often what causes people to overlook or misunderstand it. At the core of this process is the alignment of three fundamental human capacities: clear goals, focused attention, and emotional engagement. Each of these on their own has value, but the real transformation happens when they are brought together in a coordinated and consistent manner. A clear goal acts as a neurological destination. It tells the brain what to aim for, what to prioritize, and what to ignore. Without a clear goal, the brain is left to wander aimlessly, pulled in countless directions by distraction and environmental noise. Clarity acts as a signal that organizes thoughts and behaviors around a central theme. It creates order where there might otherwise be chaos. When the brain knows what it's aiming for, it begins to filter information accordingly, elevating what's relevant and discarding what's not. This is not a matter of willpower, but of biological filtering systems working in your favor. Once a clear goal is in place, the next layer is focused attention. Attention is the gateway to neuroplasticity. It is the spotlight that determines which neural circuits will be strengthened and which will fade. Focused attention is what transforms a vague desire into a neurological priority. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions and goal-directed behavior, becomes highly engaged when you direct your attention consistently toward a specific outcome. This focused state allows the brain to suppress irrelevant stimuli and amplify signals that support your goal. Over time, this creates a kind of neurological magnetism where your thoughts, actions, and even your memory begin to orbit around the goal you've chosen. It becomes easier to notice opportunities, recognize useful information, and maintain motivation, not because those things weren't there before, but because your attention wasn't tuned to them. Emotional engagement is the fuel that energizes this entire system. When you pair a clear goal and focused attention with a strong emotional state, you activate a deep biological response that makes the goal feel urgent, important, and real. The brain does not treat all information equally. It prioritizes experiences that are emotionally charged because those experiences are often linked to survival and meaning. By emotionally engaging with your goal, whether through visualization, gratitude, anticipation, or deep desire, you signal to your nervous system that this matters. That emotional charge helps to imprint the goal more deeply into your neural architecture. The limbic system, particularly the amygdala and hippocampus, plays a key role here by tagging emotionally significant memories and goals for long-term storage and recall. This process also increases the release of neurotransmitters like dopamine, which reinforces the goal-seeking behavior through feelings of motivation and reward. The alignment of these three elements, goal clarity, focused attention, and emotional intensity, creates a powerful internal coherence. This coherence is not something abstract. It is a measurable synchronization of brain regions that allows for smoother, more efficient processing. Your conscious mind, subconscious tendencies, and even your physiological responses begin to align in the direction of the goal. This alignment reduces internal friction. You no longer need to force yourself to act because the goal has become an integral part of your identity and cognitive framework. This is why people who achieve what they visualize often report a sense of inevitability or flow. They're not pushing themselves, they're being pulled by the alignment they've created within their nervous system. Another critical point is that this process is repeatable and scalable. You don't need extraordinary talent, perfect timing, or external validation. What you need is consistency in aligning these three pillars. Each time you sit down and clearly define what you want, direct your attention to it, and engage with it emotionally, you are rehearsing success at the neurological level. Just like athletes use mental rehearsal to improve performance without physical movement, you can build the same pathways that support your desired outcomes through mental and emotional alignment. This also strengthens belief, which is simply the byproduct of repeated exposure to a coherent internal state. When you repeatedly think about a goal with focus and emotion, the brain begins to treat it as familiar, and familiarity breeds belief. Belief, in turn, reduces resistance and hesitation, allowing for more fluid action and receptivity to opportunities. What makes this entire system so deceptively simple is that every human already has the tools required, the ability to think clearly, to pay attention, and to feel deeply. There is no need for advanced education, special training, or expensive programs to start applying this. The brain is always forming new patterns based on where you direct your mind and how strongly you connect with those thoughts emotionally. The key is to stop scattering your focus, to stop switching goals every few days, and to stop engaging with your desires in a detached or indifferent way. Manifestation is not a one-time event, but a continuous process of internal alignment repeated over time. One of the biggest misconceptions about quantum manifestation is that it's difficult, elusive, or reserved for people with extraordinary levels of focus or spiritual discipline. In reality, the process is simple and accessible, but the challenge lies in the consistency of execution. Most people fail to experience its results, not because they lack the capacity, but because they don't stick with the process long enough for its effects to become visible. Human beings are hardwired to seek novelty and immediate gratification, which makes it difficult to stay committed to a daily mental and emotional practice that doesn't provide instant rewards. The brain, especially the dopamine system, is always scanning for cues that something is working. If it doesn't receive that signal quickly, it starts to divert attention elsewhere. This biological impatience is one of the main reasons why people abandon the practices that lead to manifestation long before they bear fruit. Another major barrier is the absence of structure. People often hear about manifestation and assume it's a passive process. They think it means visualizing a dream life and waiting for it to arrive. But in the absence of a repeatable, structured system for reinforcing intention and directing attention, the brain doesn't adapt. Without regular input, neural circuits connected to your goal do not strengthen. In fact, they weaken. Just like unused muscles, neural pathways decay through disuse. Structure creates the necessary repetition to keep those pathways alive. When you commit to a daily routine such as morning visualization, affirmations, journaling, or meditation, you are providing the brain with clear signals about what matters. These practices aren't magical, they are simply tools for creating the consistency that rewires the brain. Without that structure, manifestation remains a vague hope rather than a reliable process. The people who succeed in manifestation are not those who visualize the most vividly or feel the deepest emotion just once. They are the ones who revisit their goals every single day with deliberate focus and emotional intensity. This consistent repetition begins to train the brain to see those goals as familiar and achievable, reducing resistance and increasing motivation. The mind loves familiarity. It interprets repeated input as evidence that something is real and worth pursuing. The problem is that many people focus more often on what they don't want than on what they do want. They think they are manifesting success, but in reality, they are rehearsing failure, stress, and anxiety. Their attention is locked onto fears and worst-case scenarios, and their emotional energy reinforces those mental patterns. As a result, their nervous system becomes more attuned to problems than possibilities, more sensitive to danger than to opportunity. This misalignment between what people say they want and what they actually practice mentally and emotionally is one of the most common reasons manifestation efforts fall short. If you say you want abundance but constantly focus on lack, your nervous system becomes wired for scarcity. If you want love but mentally rehearse rejection, your body responds as if connection is unsafe. This is not just theoretical. The autonomic nervous system, which regulates stress and relaxation, adjusts itself based on the thoughts and emotions you engage with repeatedly. Over time, your physiological baseline shifts to reflect your dominant internal state. That state then influences your posture, your tone of voice, your facial expressions, and even the kinds of people and opportunities you unconsciously attract or repel. All of this happens below the surface, but it shapes your outcomes in profound ways. People also underestimate the power of small daily actions. There's a tendency to think that manifestation requires big, dramatic efforts. But the brain is much more responsive to consistent micro-signals than to occasional grand gestures. A 5-minute visualization done every day will have a far greater impact than a 1-hour session done once a month. Consistency beats intensity because it keeps the neural pathways engaged and growing. The small daily acts of focusing your mind, reinforcing your intention, and managing your emotional state are what ultimately accumulate into transformation. The effects may not be immediately visible, but they are always building. Every repetition is a brick in the foundation of a new mental model, a new emotional baseline, and eventually a new external reality. Another key reason people don't apply this consistently is because of internal doubt. Doubt creates cognitive dissonance. It splits your mental energy and weakens your neural signal. When you set a goal, but immediately question whether it's possible, you activate competing circuits in the brain. One circuit is trying to move you forward, while another is signaling caution or disbelief. This inner conflict confuses your nervous system, resulting in half-hearted efforts and unclear behavioral cues. The brain thrives on clarity. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions are aligned, the brain locks in. But when you send mixed messages, the result is stagnation. Overcoming this requires not only repetition, but belief built through small wins. Each time you commit to a daily practice and follow through, you send a signal to your brain that you are serious. Over time, those signals become your new identity. Manifestation stops being something you try to do and becomes something you live from the inside out. The fundamental mistake most people make when attempting to use manifestation is approaching it from a place of desperation rather than coherence. Desperation comes from lack. It carries an energy of urgency, fear, and disconnection. When the nervous system is in a stressed state, especially a chronically activated fight or flight mode, it cannot effectively integrate new beliefs or focus on desired outcomes with clarity. Instead, the brain becomes consumed with survival-based thoughts, which are typically negative, repetitive, and focused on what's missing or threatening. In this state, manifestation efforts are often blocked, not because the person is doing it wrong, but because their physiological state is incompatible with the openness, curiosity, and creativity that manifestation requires. To align your biology with the outcomes you want, you must first shift your internal state from stress to safety. When the body feels safe, the mind can begin to explore, imagine, and direct itself intentionally. That's when quantum manifestation becomes not only possible but natural. Coherence is the condition in which your thoughts, emotions, and physical state are synchronized and working in harmony. This is not just a concept from personal development, it's measurable in real time through heart rate variability and brainwave patterns. When someone is coherent, their heart, brain, and respiratory system operate in a smooth, coordinated rhythm. This state creates a kind of internal resonance that amplifies the brain's ability to visualize, focus, and rewire itself. The opposite of coherence is fragmentation, which happens when your desires, beliefs, and emotions are pulling you in different directions. You might want financial freedom, for example, but feel deep guilt or fear around money. That emotional dissonance acts as static, disrupting the clarity of your focus and intention. Coherence is the process of resolving that internal contradiction by bringing all parts of yourself into alignment around a common vision. This alignment is what makes manifestation so deceptively simple. It is not about controlling the universe or forcing outcomes. It's about becoming internally congruent with the outcome you desire. When your thoughts say yes, your feelings say yes, and your actions say yes, you become like a signal tower emitting a strong, focused frequency. Other people interpret this signal, often unconsciously, and opportunities begin to shift because your behavior, body language, and emotional tone change. The science of mirror neurons and social resonance shows that humans are wired to respond to each other's emotional and physiological states. When someone is confident and clear, it draws attention. When someone is conflicted or desperate, it repels. Manifestation works not because of external manipulation, but because internal alignment makes you a more effective communicator, decision maker, and attractor of aligned experiences. Breath and body posture are two of the fastest ways to enter coherence. When you slow your breathing and lengthen your exhales, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for rest, recovery, and emotional regulation. In this state, the brain becomes more receptive to new ideas and more capable of sustained focus. Similarly, your body posture feeds back into your emotional state. Standing tall with an open chest and relaxed shoulders sends signals to the brain that you are safe, confident, and prepared. This feedback loop between the body and the mind is continuous and powerful. When used deliberately, it becomes a foundational tool for sustaining the emotional and physiological coherence needed for manifestation to work consistently. The second major tool is intentional language. The words you speak and think shape your perception and ultimately your neurobiology. Language is not passive, it is generative. When you say things like, "I always mess this up," or "nothing ever works out for me," you are reinforcing neural pathways that encode failure and hopelessness. On the other hand, when you use language that reflects the future you are creating even before it manifests, you begin to condition your nervous system for that outcome. Phrases like "I'm learning how to handle this" or "every day I'm becoming more aligned" activate a different set of neural circuits. These affirmations aren't about pretending, they are about choosing which parts of your brain to strengthen. Over time, your internal dialogue becomes a powerful tool of transformation, especially when spoken with emotion and clarity. Visualization works best when it is multisensory and emotionally rich. The brain responds more powerfully to mental imagery that involves not just seeing, but feeling, hearing, and even tasting and smelling the imagined experience. This level of vividness creates more neurological engagement, which increases the likelihood that your brain will treat the visualization as a real event. When paired with strong positive emotions such as gratitude, joy, or calm excitement, the visualization imprints more deeply and begins to alter the subconscious mind. This is the state where manifestation accelerates because the subconscious is what truly drives behavior, perception, and energy. Most people try to change their reality through conscious effort alone, but the subconscious governs 90 to 95% of our daily actions and decisions. To influence the subconscious, you must speak its language, which is repetition, emotion, imagery, and physiological coherence. When these components are practiced together, coherent physiology, empowering language, and emotionally charged visualization, the entire nervous system begins to operate as a single, aligned unit. This is when internal resistance drops and external synchronicity increases. You begin to meet people, encounter opportunities, and notice ideas that were previously hidden in the noise of a disorganized inner state. None of this happens by accident. It's the result of deliberate, biologically grounded practices repeated with consistency and intention. Quantum manifestation, at its essence, is not about bending reality with mystical force, but about aligning deeply with the mechanics of your own nervous system in a way that naturally brings about the outcomes you desire. It is a science-based process rooted in how the brain filters reality, assigns value, and drives behavior based on internal focus and emotional charge. What makes it so powerful, and at the same time so commonly overlooked, is that it operates invisibly at the intersection of intention, perception, and biology. Most people go through life believing that circumstances are the cause of their inner states, not realizing that their inner states are constantly shaping how they interpret, engage with, and respond to those very circumstances. The quality of your internal world determines what you see, what you prioritize, and what actions you take. This is the real quantum shift, not a change in external reality first, but a shift in perception that begins to rewire your interaction with the world around you. At the core of quantum manifestation is the concept of the observer effect. In physics, this principle refers to the way the act of observation changes the outcome of a quantum event. On a psychological level, the same applies. What you observe, what you consistently give attention to, begins to collapse the infinite possibilities of your life into a tangible outcome. The brain is a prediction machine. It is constantly trying to create coherence between what it expects and what it experiences. When you continuously feed it a vision of a desired future, supported by emotion and attention, it begins to bias perception, filter information, and even change physiological responses to align with that expectation. This process is not magical, it is neurological and hormonal. Repeated visualization with emotional intensity leads to the release of neurochemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine, which mark that vision as important and reward-oriented. This primes the nervous system to seek, notice, and act on opportunities in alignment with that goal. Another powerful concept in this process is identity. The strongest force in the human psyche is the drive to act consistently with who you believe you are. Manifestation fails for most people not because their desire is weak, but because their self-image is incompatible with the outcome they want. If someone holds a subconscious identity of being unworthy, unlucky, or limited, that belief will override even the most focused intentions. The subconscious mind, which governs 95% of behavior, always wins in the long term. Therefore, the real work of quantum manifestation involves shifting identity, not just thinking about what you want, but becoming the version of yourself who naturally attracts and creates it. This happens through repetition, visualization, and emotional reinforcement, all of which rewire the brain's default mode network, the system responsible for self-referential thinking. Neuroscience shows that the brain doesn't differentiate between real and vividly imagined experiences. This gives you a biological advantage by mentally rehearsing your future with the emotional and sensory detail of it already being real. You can build the neural architecture required to live into that reality. Athletes have used this for decades to improve performance without physical movement. What you mentally practice becomes a part of your brain's operating system. Over time, your internal model of reality begins to shift. You no longer just hope for success, abundance, or health. You begin to embody the habits, choices, and energy of someone who already lives that reality. This embodiment is the real signal to the world. People sense it, opportunities respond to it, and your own brain supports it through enhanced confidence, pattern recognition, and motivation. Emotion is the amplifier in this process. Thought alone is not enough to drive transformation. It must be fused with feeling. Emotion signals the brain that something is significant and worth remembering. This is why traumatic memories are so vivid and why moments of joy are so deeply imprinted. When you pair a clear vision of the future with strong emotional states like gratitude, inspiration, or joy, you not only engage more of your brain, but you condition your body to feel as if the future is already happening. This reduces the stress and desperation that come from longing and instead cultivates a feeling of certainty and trust. Certainty is one of the most attractive and magnetic states a person can embody. It influences how you speak, how you move, and what decisions you make. The body becomes your proof. It shows up in tone, in posture, in presence, all of which communicate far more than words. It's also important to understand the role of habits in quantum manifestation. Every choice you make is either reinforcing or weakening your alignment with your desired future. Daily routines are not trivial. They are the repeated signals that tell your brain who you are becoming. When you wake up and immediately review your vision, practice gratitude, regulate your breath, and set an intention for how you'll think and feel, you're not just having a good morning, you are conditioning your nervous system for transformation. Over time, these small, consistent actions compound. They create momentum, and momentum is where most people fail. They wait for motivation instead of creating systems that automate alignment. Manifestation becomes reliable when you no longer rely on willpower, but instead build a lifestyle around the identity you are stepping into. This identity-driven manifestation is sustainable because it becomes who you are, not something you're trying to achieve.